Every night, a strange flight of stairs appears in my room. I need to find out where they lead before it's too late. It all started just after I moved back to my old house. I had been going through a messy divorce, and unfortunately, the whole painful process had forced me to go back to the only other home I knew and the only other place I could afford. I moved back into my parents' old house, though they no longer lived there. The place had been rented out since they had moved away. Ultimately, they did not have the heart to sell it. I suppose it had worked out. Since I was being forced to come home, they were able to set me up there with almost no rent and a general agreement to look after the old place. Though I was grateful for a chance to start over, the move back heralded the strange events that followed and were the catalyst of why I am stuck where I am now. It was the first evening back in the house after nearly 10 years. I had wished my parents were there, but I contented myself just exploring and reminiscing as I wandered the halls and brought the few possessions I still owned inside. It was surreal being back, especially living there all by myself now. I finally managed to get all my boxes inside, and I let out an exhausted sigh and closed the front door. I was tired from moving and knew I had an early morning with a longer commute to work the next day. I decided to turn in early and went to my old room, which I had put all my bedding in. It was smaller than my parents' room, but the familiarity compelled me to stay in there for the night, even if I might end up moving to a larger room later. I threw myself on the small mattress that I had brought and was fast asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. I had a few dreams of my childhood in the short time I slept, but my brief rest was not meant to last. In a few short hours, sometime just after dark, I woke up. At least I think I woke up. The entire experience left a heavy fog in my mind, one that still felt very much like a dream. The sensation was strong enough to compel me to get up. I decided I would get a glass of water and try and go back to sleep. When I stood up, I saw that the door to the bedroom was ajar. I thought I had closed it, but I figured I must have forgotten. I walked up to the door and threw it open. I was stunned by what I saw. The hallway was gone. In its place was a spiral staircase. I rubbed my eyes to make sure I was seeing what I was seeing. This had to be a lucid dream, but it all felt too real. The stairs I was looking at were heavy stone, not unlike the tower of a castle or cathedral. There was a drowning echo ringing out in the cavernous stairwell that unsettled me. I leaned in to get a better look around, and I felt the rush of air flowing through it like a tunnel. The stairs were a spiral that went both up and down, even though I was already on the top floor of the house. I had no cause to question dream logic, so I decided to enter the stairwell and go down. I thought maybe I would still find a kitchen in my sleep and be able to get a drink before going back to bed. I stepped onto the stairs, and my feet were chilled by the cold surface of the stone steps. They felt real, and I hesitated for a moment. I began walking downstairs, slowly at first. The spiraling stairs gave me a sense of vertigo, despite not being too steep. I brushed it off and continued. Moving on for a few minutes, the scenery had not changed. The stairs spiraled ever downward, but there was no door, no exit, just more steps. I had been walking for so long that I knew I would have passed the first floor minutes ago. My descent slowed, and I realized I was getting nowhere. At least I did not think I was. I decided to turn around and go back to my room. Maybe once I got there, I would wake up from this bizarre dream. I turned around and started back up the stairs. When I looked up, I saw the spiraling steps looming down at me like a skyscraper. I could not even perceive the top. I kept walking for a similar stretch of time to my original descent. I started to grow concerned when I passed several levels with no door or aperture to exit. I knew I should have passed the door I had entered by that point. I started to move faster, my feet thrumming dully off the stone steps as I raced up and up. I started feeling the walls for hidden handles or levers. I needed something, anything, to get out of this stairwell, which began to feel more claustrophobic by the moment. After running up the stairs for what felt like ages, I felt exhausted. My heart was hammering in my chest, but I saw something that finally gave me pause. It looked like writing on the wall. It was the faint outline of what may have been chalk. I stepped closer and squinted in the gloom to see the writing on the surface of the wall. It read, "If you see this, turn around. Grabbers are ahead. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. The grabbers will get you if they attack. I will help you if you help me. So up then down, down and away you'll be. Stay safe, Sherrie." I was confused by the message. Who was Sherrie? And what was a grabber? I considered the odd writing and was about to blow it off when I heard something. There was a soft, dragging sound, echoing down from the stairs above. I paused to listen and heard a pronounced shuffling noise, followed by the movement of some lumbering form upstairs. As I stood there, listening in rising tension, I also smelled a fetid odor and felt a chill current of air billowing down the narrow stairwell. I suddenly felt very vulnerable, and the disturbing dragging sound from upstairs grew louder and more insistent. I decided I needed to get away from that sound and whatever was making it as fast as possible. I turned back and started rushing down the stairs again. In my haste, I nearly slipped, and when I caught myself on the wall, the sound of my palms slapping against the cold stone echoed all around and above me as well. Suddenly, there was a feral cry from above me, and the slow dragging sound gave way to loud, ringing footsteps sprinting along the stairs. I started to panic and kept running down the stairs. The sound behind me grew louder and louder. I could not seem to gain any ground on whoever or whatever was making that sound. Whatever its nature, it moved with terrifying speed, and I did not think I could outrun it. Then I began to hear the low rumbling tone of labored breathing echoing down the stairwell. I had to get out of there. Whatever was chasing me was gaining fast and would catch me at the rate I was going. I was considering something as I fled. I thought of the strange writing and realized I might have one chance to try something. The writing had mentioned steps up and down. I turned back toward the encroaching sound above me, and against my better judgment, I took a step up the stairs. Then, without turning around, I walked backwards, down 2 steps. I heard an odd shifting sound, and as if acting on some unknown instinct, I reached my hand to the right without looking and grasped the door handle. I barely had a moment to register my success when I heard the thunderous sound of rampaging footsteps bearing down on me. I took one glimpse into the shadows above me and saw the outlines of large figures rushing down towards me. I snapped out of my terrified daze and threw the door open and fell through. Kicking the door closed as I dropped. I landed back in my room and painfully sat up, huffing and puffing. I had no idea what the hell happened, but I was grateful to be back in my room. I walked over to my nightstand and grabbed my phone. I saw it was 2 in the morning and I turned on the flashlight. I inched closer to the door and listened carefully. I did not hear anything. No ominous clamor or the thundering pursuit of hidden hunters, just silence. I tried to quell the paranoid feeling in my mind as I nervously grasped the handle and slowly opened the door. I peeked through the narrow opening I had left and saw the hall of my house. No stairwell, no stone steps, no shrouded figures, just the hall. I let out the breath I had been holding on to and relaxed. I decided against going downstairs for water. I did not want to see any more stairs just then. Instead, I resolved to just go back to bed. I had no idea what I had taken that day that would give me such vivid and unsettling dreams. If I knew, I would try and avoid it in the future. I shambled back to sleep and saw something odd. It was near where I had unceremoniously thrown my mattress earlier that day. There were markings on the wall, just faded enough that I had not noticed them earlier. I looked closer and saw another message drawn in chalk. I was starting to get concerned. I knew I was awake, but this looked like the message I had seen on those impossible stairs. It read, "If you are seeing this, I couldn't find my way back. I rented the place for a while, but I found the steps. I need to see where they lead. I don't know if this is a dream or reality, but in case it's real and I don't come back, send help. Sherrie." It was the same person who signed the message on the stairs. Same name, same chalk. How had they left a note in my room and in my house? They said they had stayed here and gotten lost on the stairs. With dawning horror, I considered the implications of the writing and how it was there in my room while I was awake. I began to realize that everything I had experienced that night was real. The endless stairs, the shadow figures stalking the spiraling steps, as well as someone named Sherrie, trapped in that labyrinthian staircase with whatever those grabber things were. I had no idea what to do next, but I knew I had to do something. I had taken my first step into a madness-inducing spiral, and wherever it led, or who it led to, would have to wait for another night. Every night, a strange flight of stairs appears in my room. I need to find out where they lead before it's too late. Part 2. I was too shaken by my experience to go back to sleep. Instead, I decided to stay up and do some research. I found myself checking out all of the normal, paranoid things someone who thinks they have seen another dimension might look up. After hours of internet rabbit holes and theory overload, I decided to head outside and sleep in my car for a few hours. I had given up trying to make it to work that day, so I called in sick. I figured I needed to spend my day looking into anything that would help me understand what I had witnessed last night. I decided to call my parents and ask about their prior tenants. That message from Sherrie said she had stayed in the house. Maybe they would remember her. I called and was prompted to leave a message at first, but as I was trying to figure out what to say in the message, the phone rang and I switched over to answer the incoming call from my mom. "Hi Mom, how are you doing?" "Oh, I am just fine, sweetie. How is the house? Are you getting settled in?" "Yeah, I am, thanks." I was actually calling with a weird question. "Do you know how long ago the last person rented the house before me?" There was a considerable pause, and I thought the connection might have been lost. Then she spoke again. "Oh well, let's see. I think the last person who stayed was that nice young woman, Cheryl or Sharon." There was another pause as she was thinking, and I considered her words and helped her along. "It was Sherrie, right?" "Oh yes, that's right. I am surprised you knew. I don't remember me or your father mentioning it. Anyway, she was only there for about a month, and your father says she left one night and did not come back. She left a few things there and never returned for them. I don't know what happened to her, but I was worried when she vanished. She seemed like such a sweet girl. In fact, I think she might have gone to school with you. She looked so familiar, and she was around your age." I started thinking back, and I did vaguely remember a Sherrie in junior high. I remember having a crush on her, but her family had moved away at some point, and I was always too shy to say anything. I wondered when she had come back and why she had been staying at my parents' house alone. Then I considered the disturbing implications of her being trapped in that strange stairwell with those creeping horrors. "Sweetie, are you still there?" My mother's voice brought me back to the present, and I responded apologetically. "Sorry, Mom. I was just thinking about something. I had one more question. Have you or Dad ever had any weird dreams about a stairwell in the house? Like a large, stone spiral stairwell?" There was another long pause. "Oh well, I don't know. I don't think. No, I haven't. We haven't." What a silly question. She laughed nervously, and her response sounded like she was trying to convince herself more than anybody else that she had not actually had an experience with the stairs. I was suspicious, but did not press the issue any further. I was about to ask about something else when she suddenly excused herself, mentioning that her and my dad had to head out to pick something up, but to call back anytime. I had more questions than answers, but I had a few things to go on now. I looked up my old yearbook, and sure enough I saw Sherrie in my class. I remembered all the time I wanted to say hi, but never did. I had no idea what she would have been doing here all these years later. Never mind how she had gotten stuck in that twisted spiral of madness. However she had gotten trapped, I had to help her. When nighttime fell again on the house, I was in a nervous state of apprehension. I knew what I had to do, but the anxiety of waiting was palpable. I went upstairs to my room and packed a backpack full of some supplies, food, water, a long piece of rope, clips and carabiners. Also a large hunting knife. It was far from complete, but it was all I could throw together on short notice. I kept checking the door over and over again for the next 2 hours. Each time I looked, the doors simply lead to my own hallway. I started wondering what the trick was, if any, or if I might just be going crazy, but how could I be? How could I have known about Sherrie? My mom had confirmed she had been at the house. So despite how insane the situation was, I figured she must still really be there. Eventually, I decided to give in to my fatigue and sleep. I set a short alarm so I would not sleep through the night. Whatever had caused the stairs to appear, it happened at nighttime, after I had already been asleep. So I had to try and replicate the environment. I fell asleep almost immediately, and sure enough, before the alarm even activated, I woke up to an odd sensation. It was dark, and there was a humid, charged atmosphere in the room. I saw the door was slightly ajar. I moved closer, held my breath, and slowly opened it. I saw it all again. The spiral staircase was back. It towered over me as I looked up and saw the winding stone steps. I found myself carefully listening to any sounds that might be made by any hunting grabbers. Fortunately, the ambience was mercifully quiet. I took one step inside and peered down the steps and felt another rush of air. There was a strange humidity this time I had not noticed before. I also detected a strange smell. It sort of smelled like salt or salt water, like I was close to an ocean. The odd scent was confusing, but it was not the strangest thing I had seen in that place. I decided that while the door was still open, I would try a more measured approach than blindly stepping inside like last time. I grabbed the length of rope I had in my backpack and tied and double knotted an end around a heavy dresser in my room. Then I tied the other end securely around my waist and threaded it through the carabiner. I had about 50 feet of room to play with. With this setup, I could hopefully find my way back to the door quickly if those grabber creatures showed up again. I carefully walked into the stairwell. I kept looking back over my shoulder to see if the door was still open, and each time I checked, the aperture still yawned wide. The image of the safety of my room was comforting, and it emboldened me to ascend the steps. I was not sure specifically what I was looking for, but I moved on, carefully observing my surroundings as I went. While searching, I saw something after moving about 15 feet up the steps. It was another message. I scrambled over and read it as quickly as I could. Portions of this message were almost illegible, and the chalk looked scribbled and rushed. Certain parts had smudged off the wall, and I struggled to read as much as I could. Sorry, I have to write this quick. Your last visit stirred up, and I think not safe anymore. Find the overlap. Somewhere above room. Be careful if you a sound. Above. Sound on the wall. Heralds the surf's call. Please, hold, breath the water. It's safe from them, but you are not safe from something else. I will try and find you. Water can connect. Hurry. Sherrie. Another message I could barely understand, though it was heartening to see she was still okay and has escaped last night. One detail I did understand was that I had to keep going up. I had to find what Sherrie had called an overlap. It was good to hear that I had been going the right way. I continued on nervously for a short while. I kept walking slowly, trying to ignore the lingering fear of more of those grabbers ambushing me further up the steps. Then another concern struck me. I looked back and tugged the rope I had tied around my waist. It was still loose, but when I looked back and saw how many stairs I had ascended, I started to worry. I began pulling on the rope, and as I did, the rope kept coming toward me in bundles. My heart sank when, after pulling yards of rope towards me, I saw what I had expected at that point. The end of the rope had been cut. Something has just severed it further down towards the door. That was why it had pulled free. I did not know who or what might have cut it, but it did not matter. I had a feeling if I went back down the steps to where the rope end had fallen, the door would be gone. I was stuck in there again. I held onto the rope and looked up, then down again. I was starting to panic, and I tried stepping forward once, and then back twice. I reached to my right, but no door was there. Apparently, the trick to leaving would not work this time. As my anxiety increased, I heard a noise coming from above. It sounded like a rhythmic tapping noise. I relaxed slightly when I considered the fact that it sounded different than the grabbers. I strained my ears and continued listening to the tapping sound. It has a pattern to it that sounded like some means of communication. I thought it could be Sherrie trying to communicate to me. She was supposed to be above in whatever the overlap was. I took a few steps up and rested a hand on the cool stone wall. Out of curiosity, I tapped on the wall. 3 short taps, followed by 3 longer ones, finishing with 3 shorter taps. I waited for a long moment in the silence that followed. I had hoped if she was there, she would have heard the SOS. What followed was a loud banging sound followed by an ear-piercing shriek that nearly knocked me off my feet with a sudden outburst. Whatever was above me burst into motion. I heard scratching, rushed motion over the steps, and an ululating scream resounding down the spiraling steps. I struggled to resist screaming myself, but instead I turned around and began rushing back down the stairs. My body ached as I hurtled down the stairs at speed. The motion above me increased, and I heard thundering footsteps and shrieking that was even louder now. It felt like the sound was going to burst my eardrums. I smelled that odd salt water scent even stronger as I rushed down the steps. I remembered the message Sherrie had sent. Sounds on the wall hurl the surf's call. There was water down there, and maybe if I could get further down, I would be safe. I kept running madly down the steps until there was a rush of air, and a huge figure leapt down several steps and crashed into a heap in front of me. It quickly recovered and stood up to its full height. Transfixed in horror, I slowly backed away and into the walls, pressing myself flat against it. I took in the terrible sight of the creature before me. The thing was massive, standing around 8 feet in height. It looked like a skinned gorilla. The hulking frame was covered in red exposed meat, muscle, and sinew. Only ragged chunks of anything still resembling skin remained on a few smaller areas. Worst of all was the slavering maw that held 3 individual rows of serrated teeth. The imbalanced rows of fangs shifted and moved in a terrible jerky fashion, as if they had a mind separate from the beast whose mouth they resided in. As it shifted its terrible maw, I smelled the acrid stench of its drool as it dripped on the stone steps. I thought I was dead, but as I tried to sink into the wall, I noticed something. The eyes were milky white cataracts that did not follow me as I shrunk back. The only reason it had not jumped me directly was because the thing appeared to be blind. I held my breath and watched it move. It jerked its head back and forth, while the crater on its face where a nose should have been made a distinct sniffing sound. I was terrified but remained completely still and held my breath. Then it took a step forward and reached an oversized arm towards the wall. The prodigious claws on the hand touched the wall just a hair's breadth from where my head was. It tapped the stone several times with its claws, and a responding sound came from high above us on the steps. It seemed to be communicating to more of them. I nearly toppled forward and gave away my position when it let out a deafening shriek. It sniffed again, and then I heard something besides the creature. It sounded like waves lapping against a building. That was it. The water was down there somewhere, and it was close. I forced my terrified body to shift slowly against the wall and inch by inch down the steps. The creature looked as if it had not noticed me, and I saw it was touching the steps further up from where I had come from. If I could make it to the water, the message said I might be safe. For a moment, I considered reaching for the knife I had brought, but another look at the size of the thing made me reconsider the idea. I managed to take several quiet steps away from the blind creature. It turned around and I froze. Now it was moving back towards me along the wall. I had to move, so I quietly slipped closer to the center near the edge of the spiral steps. Making it to the edge of the spiral, I looked down and saw the area below was flooded about 20 feet further down. I kept creeping further away from the blind monstrosity, but I tripped over a broken step and cut my heel on a sharp edge. I kept myself from crying out and bit my tongue. But to my horror, the creature turned around and sniffed again. It did this 3 times and then centered its dead gaze squarely on me. A long proboscis-like tongue slipped out of its mouth and licked the rows of teeth before it moved toward me. I had no time left. I could not outrun it. I moved to the edge of the spiral and jumped. If I had been a second slower, the creature would have caught me in its lightning-fast lunge. It was standing near the edge where I had just jumped in a blur. I remember falling, and I could only make out a second or so of the monstrous shrieking roar before my entire body plunged into the cold water. My eyes snapped open, and I tried to swim up, but my limbs were not responding. The sting of salt water was already in my lungs. I tried to hold on to the breath I had taken when I fell, but it had been blasted from my lungs. The water burned my eyes, but I could see figures above me, more of the blind monsters. They did not seem able to enter the water. I was so near the surface, and the splashing I was making while trying to rise would surely have given them the opportunity to attack. I heard the distorted noise of another scream, and the figures left. I was finally able to propel myself towards the surface, and I got my face above the water for a moment, gasping for fresh air. I heard tapping and scratching noises on the stone, and the shrieks sounded much further away. I wondered why they would not wait to ambush me if they knew I was down there in the water. I swam toward the portion of stairs that were closest to the water's surface and rested a moment there. I started trying to pull myself up when I heard a rushing sound. It sounded like a dam being released and tons of water all pouring down into a singular point. Suddenly, the reason for the creature's swift departure was made evident. Water started pouring into the stairwell, and it began to rise at an impossible rate. I was swept off the stairs and lost my grip as the water's surface rose rapidly. There was water pouring in from somewhere, and an intense pull from below had gripped my legs. I tried in vain to grasp the stairs again, even for a moment to stay above the surface. But the water was rising too fast, and the faster it rose, the stronger the pull back down was. Eventually, I couldn't hold on any longer, and my grip broke. I was pulled deep into the center of the spiraling vortex of water that was the heart of the stairwell. The force of the pull and the violent descent threatened to crush my lungs, and the pressure made me go lightheaded. I reached out to grab onto steps once more and managed to slow my descent. I bobbed there in the water and took in the hopeless terror. I saw a limitless abyss bellow and crushing water above now as well. I thought I would die in that water. I saw no way out, and I remember I lost consciousness and thought I would drown. While I was out, I dreamt I was floating in a vast ocean, and a figure emerged from the waves and took my hand. I thought it might be an angel, and the light I went into must have surely been the afterlife. Then the figure bent down over me and kissed me. A wave of oxygen brought me back to reality. I gasped and reeled at the sensation of air entering my lungs again. The bright light burned my salt-scoured eyes, and I spat water out like a fountain. I was dimly aware of being in a small stone room. I could not see the stairs, but the architecture there was very similar. Then I heard a soft voice speak out, and I knew I was not alone in the room. "Oh, thank God, you made it. Are you all right now? Can you breathe?" I tried to turn my head towards the voice, but I was still coughing and gagging. "I thought I lost you for a moment there. In fact, if I had not been lucky getting to you so fast, I might have. I knew those CPR classes were worth something." The person smiled, and as my eyes focused, I saw the face of a woman. Her hair was a wild, dirty blonde tangle, and she was covered in cuts and bruises. There was even a long scar across her face that had not healed all the way. However, what struck me was the expression on her face. She looked genuinely concerned about my safety. Her green eyes were kind and thoughtful, and the spark I saw in them reminded me of someone I had seen years ago. I spoke one word after coughing up more salt water. "Sherrie." She nodded her head and knelt back down beside me. "Yes, it's me. Sorry we had to meet this way and that I was not faster. This place is a labyrinth, despite looking like a bunch of stairs. I know you must have a lot of questions, but try and rest for a moment. It should be safe enough here for most of the things that might be looking for us." I tried to respond, but I felt a terrible pain in my head and coughed up more water. Smiling weakly at her, I laid my head back down and closed my eyes. It finally felt safe enough to rest. Every night, a strange flight of stairs appears in my room. I need to find out where they lead before it's too late. Part 3. I remember moving on endless spiraling stairs. I felt like I would be walking on them forever. Part of me was not sure if it was a dream or reality. Maybe I had been walking on them this whole time, and everything else I thought had happened was really the dream. But the dream faded, and I woke again, in the same barren room I had just earlier gasped back to life in. I saw Sherrie when my eyes focused. She had a small bottle of water and was raising it to my lips. "Drink something. I know you might not want to see more water right now, but you were probably dehydrated." Almost drowning in salt water certainly didn't help. "So no more swimming for a while, doctor's orders." She flashed a smile at me to try and lighten the mood. I managed a weak nod and tried to sip some water. I felt exhausted, despite having been sleeping for who knows how long. I managed to sit up all the way and get a better look at the room we were in. The place was devoid of any real architecture. It was little more than a stone square. The only things in the room besides us were my recovered backpack, a green rucksack that must have been Sherrie's, and an odd protruding handle, which may have been part of the only door leading out of there. I asked the question that I had to ask, but feared the answer. "Where are we?" Sherrie's face darkened, and she looked thoughtful for a moment. "Well, it's hard to explain. Unfortunately, we are still on the stairs right now. This is sort of an unused room, or oubliette. We are relatively safe here if we are quiet and lucky enough to avoid the attention of certain things that live here. There are a handful of creatures that could give us some trouble if they found the door, but I don't think any are close at the moment." Her eyes shifted to the exit instinctively, then she looked back at me. "How did you know about the noises of those blind things and the water?" She regarded me thoughtfully and responded, "Well, after I found out you had escaped the first time, I had to try and help again. This place changes constantly, even though it looks the same at a glance. Sometimes useful patterns can be gleaned. You just have to pay attention to what happens and when. I knew that when there are new people and the grabbers don't get them, the smell they leave behind causes the blind ones to show, as I'm sure you are no doubt familiar with now." She flashed an apologetic smile, as the name immediately reminded me of the horrifying blind monsters that nearly slaughtered me earlier. "Yes, we had a run-in before my little swim." I acknowledged grimly. "Yeah, they are more dangerous than the grabbers, but are easier to predict and avoid, assuming you are careful enough. I tried to warn you in the message, but I was in a hurry and had other things to take care of. As for the water, well, that one is weird. But I guess there is sort of a tide, just like a beach. It rises below in the lower levels from somewhere. I don't know exactly how it works, but the blind ones know when it is coming. So, they start signaling the rising waters. It is a warning, since salt water seems to burn them like acid. They will only risk going near it if there's potential prey. She looked at me with sympathy, cleared her throat, and continued. Anyway, I'm glad I found you in time. She looked down at her hands as if she was remembering something concerning, but did not want to speak about it just then. How did you find me? Not just now, but last time as well. Did you know I was here? Could you see what I was doing? She paused thoughtfully, considering her words. Not exactly. I can sometimes see ripples on the steps, motion from things that are not from here. It's hard to explain. I can tell if someone new comes in. I was hoping I could find you before anything else did and warn you. That's why I left the messages. I nodded my head and understood what she risked by trying to help me. I was grateful for her help. I would not have survived so far without it. I suddenly felt very guilty when I considered how she was trapped here. The thought of her being stuck in this nightmare was heartbreaking, and I wondered just how long it had been. Well, I appreciate the help a lot. I owe you my life. One other thing, though, and sorry if this seems unimportant, but why the rhymes with the warnings? I asked, trying not to be rude, but curious about the extra detail she added to her messages. Oh, that. She smiled and brushed some hair out of her eyes. It helps me remember. Mornings do, helps warnings too, and friends will see your wisdom's true. She looked away and scratched her head in a bashful way that was kind of cute. I nodded my head and offered her my thanks again. I guess that it was just the way she processed things. She was grateful when she saw my reaction and sighed. I wondered again just how long she had been stuck in here all alone. I finally decided to ask, "Hey Sherrie, how long have you been here?" I saw the message in my room. It said you went into the stairs, but there was no date. She paused for a long moment, considering her response. I don't actually know. It feels like a lifetime. I have no way to track time, no phone or watch. There is not even sunlight to tell when a day is over or when it begins, so I couldn't really say. She gave a resigned little laugh, and I could tell the idea troubled her. It's a long story, but I suppose we have some time now, she said while trying to brush off the discomfort of her thoughts. She looked behind us at the door again, and I saw the jagged scar near her neck. The sight reminded me that we were not in a safe place to discuss things in detail after all. Not really. I wanted to find a way back and get us out of there, so I asked Sherrie if she had any idea how we could get out. Is there a way out that you know? Have you been able to find a door? You helped me get back to safety the first time. Her face darkened, and the expression did not inspire confidence that she had a way out for us. Well, the thing is, she started speaking, but then fell silent abruptly and looked past me to the door. She paused for a long moment, and I thought I saw her eye twitch. Suddenly, I heard a slight ringing sound in my ears, and before I could register what was going on, Sherrie was holding a finger on her lips and pointing to the corner of the room with another. She had a deranged and terrified look in her eyes, and I realized we were in trouble again. I went to the corner and covered my ears just like she had been doing, but the ringing sound only got louder. I felt a wave of distortion, and I thought I would vomit. Then, when the debilitating effect was over, I felt an odd compulsion to go to the door and open it. After all, why not? It was probably someone there to save us. They finally found us both and were going to rescue us. I stood up to greet our rescuers, but Sherrie practically tackled me to the ground. It seemed like an odd way to receive the deliverance we had been expecting. She tried to speak to me, but as I saw her mouth move, all I heard was the intense ringing in my ears. Suddenly her voice came through, faintly at first, then stronger as she repeated them, softly but sternly. Ringing heads, singing bounds. The minds of listeners, devoured sound, and those who heed will lie in the ground. Her sing-song rhyme, coupled with the pleading look in her eyes, made something snap into place in my head. I realized no one was here to save us. In fact, something was on the other side of the door, and it did not have friendly intent. Sherrie held onto my hand and tried to cover her ears with her other arm. I huddled down with her, and the disturbing waves of manipulating ringing carried through the room. The impulse to leave and walk into the waiting jaws of whatever was out there waiting was weakening. We managed to hold out until the sound died away. It felt like it took hours, but maybe it was only minutes. When it was over, we were left there in the room, drained, but alive. What the hell was that? I managed to whisper hoarsely, after just realizing that my whole body ached, and I felt oddly feverish after the encounter. Deceivers, consciousness eaters. At least that is what I call them, but I don't trust anything I have heard about them, since they mess with the minds of whoever they are near. They try to get in your head and make you offer yourself up to them. The first time I encountered one, I was only saved by the fact that I got stuck in the room I was hiding in and couldn't leave, despite trying to go to the sound I heard. I couldn't block out the ringing, and eventually it sounded exactly like my mother, calling to me. I tried to get to her for an hour before the thing grew tired of waiting and it left. After that, I realized it was best to try and avoid them and block off all your senses when they are around. Again, I marveled at how she had survived as long as she had. This place was a nightmare come to life, and she managed to survive and keep trying to escape for who knows how long against truly terrible odds. I was impressed and a little enamored by her resilience and spirit. "Thanks for saving me again," I said, slightly louder than I had meant to. She smiled, as if caught off guard by the remark. "Of course, I know you would do the same for me, right? I mean, you sort of did, coming in here after all. It means a lot to me. I know you barely remember me, but I always thought you seemed nice at school. I'm sorry I never said anything before we left." My heart fluttered a bit when I considered she seemed to have felt the same way about me back then. I had no idea how or why we were there together at that point, and I knew it was crazy to think about our situation, but I still smiled when I considered such a simple thing. I was about to ask her more about her life before getting trapped, when we heard another sound. It was a scraping, shuffling sound outside the door, then heavy footsteps and more scraping on the walls. A familiar feral cry echoed just outside the door. "More trouble," Sherrie whispered. "Grabbers, it sounds like dozens of them. We have to move. Sometimes they use these rooms as storage for their collection." She looked shaken, as if recounting another terrible memory. She grabbed her bag, then bent down and hefted my backpack and tossed it to me. "You might want to keep that knife handy. Grabbers are tough, but not invincible. They have a weird pouch near the neck that I think is directly tied to their lungs, so if you give it a good poke, they die." She pulled a stiletto out of her bag and smiled grimly. "Tight grips, though, so don't let them get a hold of your neck, or anything else you don't want broken for that matter." She turned back to the door and crept up to it. She leaned in and listened, then turned back to me and whispered, "5 or 6, they are going in waves. We need to head up and out of here when the next group passes. The last few might be carrying their latest spoils, and they are going to be kicking down the door if we are still here." I nodded my head and nervously clung to the hunting knife I had brought. I was hopeful that Sherrie had a plan and she could help us find the door and escape. As she held onto the handle, she looked at me one last time. "Get ready to run. Don't try and fight. Only defend yourself to get them off of you. If you take too long and more than one gets you, it's over. We have to reach the top. We have to get to the pinnacle. That's where it is." She looked up as she spoke, and the fervor in her eyes was almost distracting. But I was confused by what she said. "I thought we were escaping." "Wait, we're what is? Aren't we looking for the door?" I asked. She blinked hard, as if snapping out of a daydream, and responded, "Sorry. Yes, of course, we do need to escape. But there is something important." She was cut off when the door swung open and a hunched form walked straight in, holding a large burlap sack in its massive fists. "No time," Sherrie hissed, and she struck out with the stiletto and pierced the shadowy creature's throat. It fell noiselessly, and we bolted out the door. The clamor of the others down the stairs was heard as they turned and pursued us as soon as they heard our footsteps. Running up the stairs was much different than going down, and I tried to keep up with Sherrie, but I found myself tripping on every other step and barely able to fly upstairs with the same speed and grace as she did. I heard the frantic sounds of the grabbers below practically tripping over themselves to get to us. The eerie howling sounds intensified, and I did not think I was going to make it. Sherrie paused for a moment and jumped down several steps. As she traveled through the air, she managed to kick a grabber just as it was about to lay its oversized hands on my leg. She held onto my arm to lead me along, and we kept sprinting. My heart was hammering, my blood was pumping, and my vision began to tunnel. The grabbers did not seem to be tiring, and I knew I was going to get us killed. As we fled upstairs and I thought I would pass out, I saw something amazing. I saw deliverance. It was the outline of a door. It looked slightly ajar, and a small piece of cut rope was hanging near the corner of it. I couldn't believe it. I had found my door. I shouted out to Sherrie, "Wait, here it is. It's my door. We can escape. This way, hurry." I reached the door just as Sherrie was reaching out. I thought she was going to jump in with me, but to my surprise, she held onto my arm and paused at the door. "No, you don't understand. I can't. It was too late. My momentum from the mad dash pulled us both along those last few feet, and then we fell in through the door. I heard it swing shut behind us, sealing off the slavering grabbers and the echoing madness of the stairs. We made it, I gasped. I looked up and around my room and breathed a sigh of relief. Then I started looking around, and my heart sank. Sherrie was nowhere to be seen. I had no idea what had happened. Where could she have gone? She was just with me. I pulled her through. We were supposed to be safe now. We were supposed to get out. Then I remembered what she had said right before going through. She had said, "I can't," right before we fell through the door. With dawning horror, I realized she meant she couldn't leave. She couldn't leave the stairwell for some reason. She was still trapped, while I was out, alive and safe. Nothing made sense, but I knew I had to find out what was happening. I knew I had to find her again and save her before it was too late. Every night, a strange flight of stairs appears in my room. I need to find out where they lead before it's too late. Part 4. The first thing I did after standing up was to walk back to the door and open it again. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to try. Sure enough, the effort was in vain, and the stairs were gone. The empty hallway of the house was all that greeted me. I slumped down in a heap. A turmoil of emotions was swimming through my head. I was grateful to be alive and out of that treacherous labyrinth, but I felt supremely guilty in my relief when I thought about Sherrie and how she had been unable to escape with me. I knew there had to be something I could do to help from this side. Maybe I could try and find out what that place really was and how to get her out. Or failing that, get a small arsenal of weapons to go back with. Either way, since I was back again, I had to make the most of the opportunity to try and get help. As I considered what to do, a more mundane concern came to mind: my job. I walked over to where my phone was charging. I figured I might be able to make some calls and arrange some coverage for work while I sorted this madness out. I nearly gasped when I saw the date on the screen. It had to be a mistake, but my phone said that it was Tuesday, nearly a week after I had gone into the stairs. Last night had been Wednesday night. That was when I went back inside. How could it have been that long this time? The first night I was trapped in there, it hadn't been that long, or had it? I could not remember checking the date, but it couldn't be. How had so much time passed while I was in there? I started scrolling through my missed notifications. I had dozens of calls and angry messages from work, and I realized if I had been gone for nearly a week, they had probably fired me by now. I had no believable explanation for my absence, but the other messages from my parents are what really concerned me. After a lot of check-in calls and texts from my mom, the urgency and concern became clear. At first, I assumed it was just because they were worried that I was not answering, but the concern became more specific and distressed as they went on. The last message was very long and disturbingly specific. As I read it, I realized she had known more than she was letting on when I had spoken with her about the room, Sherrie, and the stairs. "Please answer, sweetheart. You need to let us know if you are okay. I told your father we should not have let anyone else stay in that room after Sherrie went missing. He said she probably just left. He never believed something was there, but I knew something was not right. He never had the dreams. He never saw them. Please don't go in. If you see them, stay away. Even if it feels like a dream, there are things in there, bad things." She was right about that. I morbidly considered as I continued to read her message. I think Sherrie went in and she never came back. Many years ago, when we bought the house, we found odd markings carved in the upstairs bedroom from one of the previous owners. It said something about a flight of endless stairs and how they had to get to the top. It said that they appear to those sensitive to the resonance. But after your father cleaned up the writing and ignored the warning, nothing happened. After living there for 30 years, we believed it was safe. But just before we left, I started dreaming about them. The stone stairs, the endless spirals. We never should have let new people stay in that house. You never saw them when you were a child, so we thought you were safe. But not after your last call and all these days. Please, son, if they are there, if you see them, you need to leave. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Your father does not like it when I talk about the stairs and the history of our house. But he does not believe it because he never saw anything himself. Please let us know you are safe. I was stunned by the message. She knew. She had seen them, if only dimly. Where the hell had they come from, and how many people have been lured in and lost to time and space? I tried to call my mom back and let her know I was okay, but I found it strange that my phone had no reception suddenly. I had no bars when my room normally had the best signal in the house. I knew it had been a week, but my phone line couldn't have been shut off. I decided to try and step outside and see if that worked. I walked downstairs to go outside. As I reached the ground floor, I suddenly felt lightheaded. A deep-seated nausea and vertigo kicked in that nearly knocked me on my back. I managed to lift my head up after breathing deep and trying to stop myself from getting sick. I shambled towards the front door, needing that fresh air more than ever. When I touched the handle on the front door, I suddenly felt a terrible chill in my body. I pulled the door open slowly, and a profound dread gripped me. Numbing terror set in as soon as I looked through the door. It was not the outside, it was the stairs. I looked on at the towering spiral steps and fell back inside. I slammed the door shut and closed my eyes. I slapped my own face a couple times for good measure and threw the door open again. The yawning stone edifice greeted me again once more. I slammed the door again harder than the last time and clutched my head. It could not be happening again, and now with other doors. I started looking around and saw the outside through the windows. I dashed over to the window in the living room and reached for the lock. As soon as the window started opening, I saw a curtain of pitch black instead of the outside. I poked my head in and turned on my phone's flashlight. Then I realized it was the square interior of one of those stone rooms I had waited in with Sherrie. Shaking my head in disbelief, I slowly closed the window and backed away. I was trapped. It was real. I was awake. It had happened in the daytime this time. Even though I had not gone into the stairs had come to me. They were everywhere now, and they would not let me leave without venturing back into that insanity. I had to think of something. I decided to try the basement door. There was another exit through there. I stumbled down the steps into the cold basement, nearly falling as I moved. I looked around, shining my phone's light to try and find the light switch. I found it and turned it on. As soon as I could see around the basement, I found the door, the only other exit I could think of. I moved towards it and held my breath, grasping the handle and pulling. It shifted slightly, but did not move. I felt an odd resistance, like there was some sort of weight or pressure on the other side. I didn't know if it was a good sign or a bad one, but I was desperate to get out of there. I pulled even harder than before and heard a strange sound, almost like splashing water. I gave one last tremendous pull, and the door opened. My mistake was evident immediately. Water burst forth into the basement. The briny smell of salt water stung my nostrils, even as it flooded into the basement. I took one look into the doorway where the water was coming from and saw the unmistakable architecture of the stone steps. They were down there too, and worse, it seemed like the basement was a portal to the flooded zone. The water crashed into the basement, and I desperately tried to close the door again, but the weight of the water was too much, and it threw me off my feet. I took one last panicked breath of air as the water rose past my head and continued pouring in, filling the entire basement in a few more moments. I started to swim, desperately seeking the stairs and the door back out. I saw them, and I struggled through the crushing current of water, pushing me along and battering me into shelves and walls. I saw the stairs and swam as fast as I could. The door was just within reach. My body ached, my lungs burned, holding on to that last gasp of air I had managed before submerging. I swam up and reached the top of the stairs, which had not flooded yet, and I pulled myself out of the water with great effort. I shoved the door open, and as I was about to crawl out and slam it shut, something grabbed my leg. I looked down in disbelief at a dark green tentacle. I tried to pull away from it, but it clung on tighter, and I lost my hold on the door and fell back, held submerged into the water and clinging to the top of the stairs. There was a terrible burning sensation in my leg as it squeezed and felt like it was cutting me somehow. I tried to pull free again, but the iron grip of the thing wrapped around my leg was enough to stop me from leaving. Not only could I not gain any ground, I had to hold on for dear life not to be pulled back into the dark water. My leg felt numb as it squeezed again, and I cried out. Looking around, I saw nothing on the stairwell to help free myself. Worse still, I felt like whatever was pulling me was moving, and I heard a low rumbling in the water below, and I knew I had to get out of that situation immediately. Suddenly, the staircase banister broke off, and I nearly pitched into the water with the loss of balance. I held on to a broken fragment of the top step and suppressed a gasp of pain, and the jagged would cut my hands. Looking back at the bubbling surface of the water, I saw another tentacle emerge. It was grasping and snaking near my other leg. I had to move fast. I reached for the broken banister and kicked the base of it with my unrestrained leg. It broke off, and I grasped for and finally reached the sharp piece of broken wood. I set to work, hacking and cutting and sawing the monstrous tentacle off of my leg. It started to squeeze harder and began thrashing and shaking me as I desperately cut to free myself. The surface of the water rippled and a small whirlpool began swirling. I tried to look away and focus on freeing myself, but to my horror more tentacles rose up from the water and a giant eyeball was visible in the center of the whirlpool. It stared at me and I felt a numb sensation go through my body. I felt like it would not be so bad to just let go and swim back into the water, to go back to the depths and black abyss from which all primal life emerged from. It would not be so bad if I just gave up. I forced myself to look away at the last moment, before I had given up completely. The mental invasion reminded me of the things that attacked me and Sherrie. That thought shook me out of the mesmerized stupor I was in. Remembering the imminent danger, I took another large swing of the broken piece of wood, finally cutting the restraining tentacle off my leg. There was a low rumbling sound from the water that might have been pain. Then I threw the sharpened wood like a spear right at the eye of the horrible leviathan and dove back out the water and through the door. Grasping, seeking appendages followed me and even extended through the door, but I barged into it from my side with my entire body weight, and the door cut the tentacles off and slammed closed. I was horrified, but alive. I realized I had finally seen the things in the water that Sherrie had said were worse than the blind ones. I shuddered and limped along, away from the basement door. I had a large, lamprey mouth-shaped wound on my leg that was bleeding, and it felt almost completely numb. I hobbled into the downstairs bathroom and grabbed a first aid kit to treat the injury. Taking a deep breath, I realized I couldn't escape now. Whatever was in there, it was not going to let me leave and get help. I understood now the desperate message that people had taken to writing on the walls before they ventured into the stairs the final time. They must not have had a choice either. I staggered back to the front door and looked at the portal leading to that living nightmare. The rational part of my brain battled with my heart when I considered my next move. I knew it would be crazy to try and go back. I knew I should never go back on those stairs if I valued my life and sanity. Maybe I could stay and wait it out, but could I really just leave her trapped in that hell? It would have been cruel to condemn a stranger to that fate, but I found the idea of leaving her even worse. Despite the short time we had been together, I found myself drawn to her. I wanted to see her again, to talk with her again. I thought of her quirky rhyming and sincere smile when she had seen me come back from the brink of death. She did not know me, but she had saved me, helped me. Even if I did not admit I was attracted to her, I still felt responsible. I owed it to her, to protect her, just as she had protected me. My course was settled. I had to go find Sherrie. Maybe together we could find a way to escape for good. We might find a way to get out while the stairs would let us. It had to work, because if it didn't, then I would be joining her forever in that stone purgatory of endless horror. I took one last look behind me at the house, then summoned my courage and stepped towards the door.